Welcome back, everybody. It's your host, Marlon Gardenera. You're listening to the Divided States of America show. Appreciate you all tuning in. You know, we're here weekdays, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, some Fridays off. Some Fridays it's just hard to talk about the divided states of America and the divisive topics that tear us apart. But we're back covering some of the things we didn't cover Friday and what we have to look forward to, I guess, today on the Divided States of America show. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Divided States of America show, where your host, Marlon Gardenera, takes on the most divisive issues in our divided nation. We'll sort through the best and worst of politics and culture, asking questions and looking for answers that our two-ring, two-party circus has failed to provide.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. It's Monday, August 29th. It's a glorious day for some of us. Some of the larger school districts in California start school today, which means my kid is gone. My spouse is back to work. I'm here alone. No, summer's almost over. The official end of summer, most of us count next weekend, Labor Day weekend. It's awful. Summer has been pretty good. Not for everybody, a little bit warm in parts of the country. Lost lives all over the country for various reasons, guns, COVID, just everyday life. You know, you wish everybody could find as much joy as I seem to find and look for. But it doesn't change the reality of this show. It is called the Divided States of America because I believe that's what we are. We tackle divisive issues, the ones that divide our nation, and they don't go away. And sometimes the same people are at the center. Unfortunately, oftentimes it's politicians and politics. But our culture is driven by a lot of things, and we do our best to cover as many of those as possible. I appreciate your feedback. I still continue to get email at host@thedsashow.com. We've had people commenting on the actual show. If you do it on YouTube and Facebook, I typically can see it on my screen and actually add it to our conversation. And as time goes on and we grow the audience, we'll be adding more of you to get your views, your perspectives on the divisive issues that run the news anyway. For those of us who can do our best to try to avoid the news, I can't do that anymore, not if I'm going to produce this show. But when I was doing it, it was great. So the things that actually impact our lives are subjects that have to be covered as well. We know Jerome Powell, coming out of a meeting last week, said interest rates and or the Fed's ability to curb inflation is still the number one priority, and they will make things hurt more if they have to by raising interest rates. And he sounds serious. And the markets have responded both Friday and today. The markets have taken a drop. And obviously the markets are a picture of the future. And the future for people in the market has questions in terms of how interest rates will go and what the impact will be. Obviously, it's intended to slow borrowing money and the purchase of things. It's intended to slow the demand so that inflation can be kept in check. Listen, long-term inflation is bad. Wages aren't going to keep up with them. So the idea that prices could go up that high and we can't catch them is a long-term problem. And I know in the political world, people like to point fingers at a pending recession or whether or not we're in one, even though there's contradictory factors in terms of our economic status. By definition, if we just talk about 2 quarters, theoretically, yes, we are probably in one. But the jobs growth, the wages growth, the lowering of inflation has people with mixed signals. The reality is, though, until we get inflation in check, things are harder for people to buy. It's harder for people with far less who have to stretch their dollars farther for the same things that they've been purchasing forever. It's just less affordable. But interest rates are still going up. Buying homes, home values. There's so many things that are going to be impacted by it. Again, not one of those things where you can look at a leader and say every 4 years we can fix inflation. We can't. So obviously my hope is that people get involved. People force our legislators and our leaders to interact, to curb highs and lows, to curb the divide, to curb the things that make it harder for people to get by. So when they take action, when politicians take action, it has more people in mind and more good in mind. And good is not only intended for the people who vote for any particular party, but good for as many Americans as humanly possible. Having said that, We talked about Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness. I have come out clearly against how it was done. I don't know that 2/5 of the wealthiest people in the world getting a $10,000 or $20,000 break is the targeted audience I would reach after if I thought the relief would significantly change something for Americans, change something for our economy, change something for the good of as many people as possible. We know that only 1/5 of the people that could potentially receive the $10,000 to $20,000 are in our lowest income brackets, 12% versus the 42% of the upper income brackets. I think that's a reflection of the fact that college is oftentimes more for the elite, people who were in a better position financially to prepare, study, tutors, SAT prep, likely parents who went to college themselves. So when you look at the socioeconomic ladder, people who didn't go to college, people who didn't or weren't able to get the skill set to have some of the higher paying jobs don't necessarily pass that along. And it just continues and that cycle continues. But when you offer loan forgiveness and more of it goes to people with a lot of money than people with very little money trying to scrape by, get enough education to make their lives better, in principle, it has obvious holes in it. I also think it was a typical campaign promise to buy votes. And I understand that people feel like they need to be elected. I have taken on Republicans left and right about some of the things they say and some of the things they do purely to appeal to their base at the expense, to me, in some cases, our country in favor of, the far right or the people that they think are most active in their party. And I believe the first person to stand up and say, I think the left is doing it too. And I think this loan forgiveness, the way it was carried out, has enough holes that it starts to look and smell like they're just buying votes in many cases. Now, the benefit, though, I like to think, is that when something is done, it's not just for people on the left. People on the right took out student loans and are going to be forgiven as well. But the timing, the amount, the targeting, it just could be better. And I happen to believe that the only way it would be better is if the people who oppose it were in the discussion so that both sides are represented, both sides find compromise, and both sides give more and give better to Americans as opposed to appeasing their parties. So if Biden does it too, I don't mind pointing it out about him either. I guess I'm an equal opportunity finger pointer in expecting that the divide be closed and that people be better about things. It's just not, unfortunately, where we're at. Now, what you don't often see is a more aggressive Biden. Right now, apparently, he's about to tout some of his legislative wins in his eyes. I can appreciate the transition for climate change and the effort to go there. I'm sure if we were going through the bill page by page, line by line, we'd find a million holes in that too. Again, I think that's in part because one side was able to craft it and they didn't have the input of the other and or a third party who could help moderate the whole discussion. So, I'm all for that. As a matter of fact, tomorrow we'll get an update on the Forward Party, see where they're at, see what they're talking about, see if they're making any progress or getting any traction. Because while I'm not a card-carrying member of that particular party, any party or the formation of one that will attempt to make the extremes of the current left and right less important by virtue of having a say not only in the voting booth but having a say in policy making, and in order to get that majority or even that 60 votes in the Senate, I would love for the day that you need to get the moderate support to do it, where we could start to bridge that gap. So a third party, is very, very exciting to me. So we'll take a look at them tomorrow and see where they're at. But Joe Biden has come out fighting. You don't often see him aggressive. People see him as passive. Some people see him as senile. I don't happen to have the same conspiratorial doubts about the man. And I would hope, just like you're seeing in the Trump administration, people coming out and being honest and talking about some of the realities they had to deal with, that if in fact Joe Biden was senile or unable to do the job or unable to grasp the concepts that were important, that we'd get whistleblowers about that too. Joe Biden, like Donald Trump, isn't that much more important than the rest of us, that they should be protected to the point where they can do harm or do bad to us at our expense in order to protect them. That does not extend any liberty or grace beyond. You need to be able to do the job for Joe Biden as well. So when there's evidence of it beyond his speech pattern or former stutter or anything like that, and goes into his actual ability to do the job, and I don't mean he's not agreeing with me, he's not deciding what I want, but his ability to actually make those decisions. But he's come out fighting. It's campaign time. They're starting to have those debates. They're starting to have those discussions, and Joe Biden is actually on the offensive, which, seems a little odd sometimes. You don't always
Over
find that.
2
But
months to go before
here
the
we go.
midterm elections, President Biden had a new attack on Republicans during a fundraiser last night. The president said, quote, "What we're seeing now is the beginning or the death knell of an extreme MAGA philosophy. It's not just Trump. It's the entire philosophy that underpins the," I'm going to say something, "it's like semi-fascism." That's a quote. In a campaign event before his fundraiser, Biden pointed his attack squarely on former President Trump.
In 2020, you and 81 million Americans voted to save our democracy. That's why Donald Trump isn't just a former president. He is a defeated former president.
Joe Biden doesn't often come out on the offensive. I guess when you get to the campaign trail, it's time to start seeing that again. Obviously, he had some direct words for Trump and MAGA, the MAGA folks. Listen, I don't care what you like, who you like. I just want people to be honest with each other. I want people to be serious and honest, because the impact of where we go makes a difference on the outcomes for more than just you and your political outcomes. I'll play a video towards the end of this, because as we go over these things, sometimes you have to ask yourself, why does this stuff matter? Who cares? Well, ultimately, we do elect a party or a person who represents a party. Sometimes the person representing the party is more extreme or takes the party in new directions. That affects the divide. That affects day-to-day life for people when you think of things like rioting. Again, I'll get back to that. But it's amazing where we let leaders take us, and the lack of accountability we hold them with. And that, I would say, even more so for your own party. Holding the people in your own party accountable and to higher standards so that you could expect and get more from the people you believe in. We already know you don't think the people you don't believe in have no standards or very low standards. But where are you on the people you actually believe in? Well, in this case, Joe Biden is coming out strong. He had some other words that he was making both in private campaign rallies and also the public ones, and they cover those differently. But he was very specific in saying he thought the right and Trump and MAGA was all about anger, violence, hate, and division. I have an opinion, but I'm more interested in yours. Feel free to make comments, Facebook, YouTube, obviously Twitter. You can tell us how you think. We'll talk about those when you do. Again, moving forward in the show, when we grow the audience, get the people there, I'll start asking and opening the window and the opportunity for people to come on air and tell us exactly what they think about these situations. But the cultures, the people, the parties are starting to take on identities, and both of them feel as if they're noble causes, and what they want is what everybody needs. And yes, many of them are willing to fight for it. But the idea that we would describe one as angry, violent, hateful, and divisive, where there's truth to that, we have a problem. And where there's truth to the left, spending other people's money with wanton disregard and not being accountable for it, we ultimately end up having that problem. The disconnect we make for the love of our party and the hatred we create for the other makes us forget that people you deal with on a day-to-day basis in your life may have that other party as their best choice. You can't imagine that those people are defined by that party such that you dislike them, hate them, want to do harm to them. Yet that's where we are in parts of our country. Yet that's where we are in many of the people who think that their feelings are being represented by a party and that they have a role and obligation to make those feelings be loud and clear. It's the same if you go back to Black Lives Matter and the rallies associated with that and the rallies that turned to riots. I happen to think many of the people that started the riots and looting were just opportunists that really didn't care about the cause. They were just low-life opportunists, I'll be honest. They just couldn't figure out anything else to do than express anger and do damage and not even be serving the cause, serving themselves, serving their anger, serving their hostility. I'm all about peaceful protest. I'm all even about disruption, peaceful disruption. I get it. You have a right to speak out. You have a right to try to impact change. You don't need to destroy anyone's property to do it. And I'm building this up because I'm pointing out when the left does it, it's wrong. When the right suggests that it will happen as a result of potentially lawful activities, it again is wrong. We'll get there. But our president was clear. He thought the right, MAGA, was about anger, violence, hate, and division. And he reminded America that Trump is a defeated president and that America at one point, at least 81 million of them, stood against that. So we'll see the punches being thrown as the campaign continues. But we know what's in the news and we hate to go back to it. But again, today over the weekend, we had evidence of why does it matter what happened at Mar-a-Lago? Why does it matter any more than the, let's say, hundreds or thousands of people who may have been raided this weekend and had search warrants executed? There was justification in theory for all of them. I understand that he was president. He's a former president now, but I don't understand the pedestal that they sit on such that we would even consider that any one of them would be allowed to break the law and that we wouldn't pursue it like we would pursue it for anyone else. And I do believe there's absolutely that feeling. Because Donald Trump was president, he is held to a different standard, which to many looks like no standard at all. So he shouldn't be bothered with these types of things. And the number of excuses we've seen thrown out to cover for why they were investigating to begin with is interesting. But we know last Friday, the judge who granted the search warrant, the magistrate who granted the search warrant, had the redacted version of the affidavit to get the search warrant released. 38 pages of evidence and legal arguments. He said it needed to be redacted to protect witnesses and threats against them and the integrity of an investigation, which happens on most search warrants. I am not trying to kid anybody. There are times when people lie to get warrants. Breonna Taylor's death apparently was impacted by lies put into or given to a judge to get a no-knock warrant to bust in that house. It happens. The FISA court hearings, 2016. Obviously, it's believed that there were lies that were given in order to get what they were looking for. It happens. But I'm guessing it happens far less than credible factual information, credible factual evidence of probable cause. And remember, you don't even have to have the actual evidence yet. You have probable cause to go get the evidence. It happens every day in America. Yet the pedestal that we put Donald Trump on makes it such that he is not subject to that. And again, the excuses that have come out to cover for that have been pretty clear. Don't know why or how we are there, but we obviously are. But again, it was redacted for witnesses, threats against potential witnesses. Obviously, there have been threats against the judge. There were threats against FBI agents who even looked into it. Why? Does anybody have credible evidence that there was absolutely no reason to look into anything or do anything? Just because people have offered excuses, have any of those been valid enough to justify that it never should have happened? It's like listening to people tell you about this lie about an election being stolen, but not being able to provide any evidence in 60 courts that would persuade any of the 60 judges that it were actually true. It's as if they think they can just keep saying it, and if you say it enough, people are just going to start buying it? The only people who buy that lie are people who want to believe that what they wanted and didn't get must have been because of something else. They can't accept you didn't get it because not enough people wanted what you wanted. It's just the reality. If you have evidence to the contrary, you can present it to me, you can present it to a judge, you can present it to the country. I'm not telling you you're wrong or crazy if you have the evidence. If you don't, I'm just questioning what is the basis for your thought? Because I just think so? Fortunately, it's not how it works, at least not how our justice system is intended to work. And where were you when injustice was happening to other people, now that you're screaming at the top of your lungs about injustice to you? As a matter of fact, Adam Kinzinger, one of the two Republicans on the January 6th Select Committee investigating January 6th, of course, said it was disgusting the people who were all for going after Hillary Clinton, squawking to get Hillary Clinton, who remain silent now and or worse, are even making excuses for Donald Trump in a similar situation. Anyway, the affidavit listed probable cause several times, including the potential for criminal actors to flee, hide evidence, change, or really, I could just say change their habits around the investigation. You typically don't tip off people in an investigation because they could get rid of evidence. It happens. They could do it. So it seems to me that they're going through the normal process, probably under more scrutiny because of who they were going after. Yet people still are coming up with enough excuses to make you think It just should have never happened. There's no there, even though we actually know there were documents actually there. They talk about probable cause and the fact that they believe evidence of obstruction will be found. They already have probable cause to think people have already been obstructing justice, and they're going to find that evidence. These things were all included in the affidavit. But I was browsing the networks and found examples of the media's missing the point. And listen, I watched some CNN and I watched them talk about each thing like it was the thing that should convince everyone how wrong Trump was, how wrong he's always been, and how this is it and he should go to jail. The confidence they exude in sharing the information, and I don't have to question whether it was factual or not, but people add their opinions about the information that's been found to make it appear as if this was it. Got him. You should have believed what we've been saying as a network all along. Again, when it's objective, factual reporting, great. When it's opinion making and the opinion making is to persuade, I get that that's the point of it. But I understand that that's the point they make with the audience they're going after for the advertising dollars they want by virtue of the audience they've created. It doesn't seem harmless because sometimes it's misleading. But if they convince people that he's bad, it may influence which way they vote. People have a choice. But the network you tune in is going to influence some of the things you say. But I watched Fox and it seemed innocuous only in that it just seemed to be excitement about the things that are being reported as factual. This is what was in the affidavit. That was in the affidavit. This is what that said. And then the speculation goes in any direction that it wants. And then I tuned to Fox News. I watch a lot of Fox News as I try to understand what the right thinks. I'm a centrist, don't understand Biden's student loan forgiveness, don't understand the defense of the raid on Mar-a-Lago. I don't get it yet. I don't think that they have enough information, have shown enough patience or restraint, and are waiting for enough evidence. But their speculation includes things like dismissing the evidence we already have. I'll show a clip or two here from Fox News.
Of classification, then why not initiate the raid right then?
I apologize.
All right, Sandra, let's bring in special report anchor and executive editor Brett Baer. Back to page 17 of this affidavit, Brett. In the documents, the 15 boxes worth, that were turned over from the former president to NARA back in January were included 184 documents bearing classification markings, including 67 documents marked as confidential, 92 marked as secret, and 25 marked as top secret. So they had an idea of what might still be at Mar-a-Lago if the president...
I have to stop there. Based on the information they had, it certainly would seem that they wanted to get more. The argument about declassification or not, whether there's a process or not, although we do have a court case that said a president verbally saying, I declassified it is not enough. There has actually been a case. And in that instance, for those circumstances, it wasn't enough. But part of the process is to notify the people that need to know that documents have been declassified. So if that process wasn't followed and the FBI was not made aware of that, they must proceed when they think there is a threat to national security. I'll say it again. I'm not arguing whether or not President Trump had the ability to declassify things, but if he had followed the process that's normally in place to do it, the FBI might have been aware of it and taken a different approach. If you fail to do what is necessary, there's a consequence. And I understand people like to make a lot of excuses for Trump, but the consequence is still going to be there. It's still going to be real. He is not a dictator. He is not authoritarian. He's not a king. He is not even the favorite person of the people in the last election. So he doesn't have a support of the majority of the electoral votes or the electors at all. Having said that, yes, they knew what was there because they had given some of the documents. But if you're going to question why they didn't move on the rest, they were told there weren't any more. You know that, John Roberts. You know that. Why did you forget?
Hadn't turned over everything. But as Sandra and David were just talking about, negotiations over the return of these records had been proceeding for the better part of 18 months.
This is where I feel like the misleading is happening. Why does the federal government have to negotiate for its own property, declassified or not? Regardless of what President Trump thinks he can do with classification and declassification, regardless of not following the process, so that people like the DOJ and FBI are aware of that, so that they don't go looking for something that, let's just say for the sake of argument, was declassified. Because he didn't go through the process, those agencies didn't know it. What they knew is that there was information out there that was highly sensitive, and it needed to be recovered for the sake of the nation's security, national security, for the sources and methods that need to be protected for the people who gather that information. If all they know is that it is still classified, why wouldn't they go through what they need to go through? And why would they need to negotiate it for 18 months? The Presidential Records Act does not say that he can take whatever he wants and keep it. That's not what it says. There is a sharing and review of information so that the president can include it in his library, can keep it for his own personal desire, for his own personal collection. But that is normally discussed. That is actually normally reviewed, and copies of many of those documents are made. The argument about classification and declassification becomes less important. The document still didn't belong to him. Why are you talking about 18 months worth of negotiation for something that he didn't have the right to negotiate over? This is what I mean by misleading. This has people in our culture pitted against each other because they say things that we know aren't true.
And we're wondering, what is it in the redacted sections of this affidavit that had the DOJ say, FBI, you got to go in, you got to seize this stuff now?
The affidavit tells you that there's sensitive information they believe was still there. They believe the document that was signed saying that they had given up all of the documents was not true. There's speculation that there was an informant who saw them and knows for certain it wasn't true. Based on the security or lack thereof at Mar-a-Lago, they wanted to make sure, at least in the early stages, that it was better secured. But then when they were told they were given the documents, when Trump's lawyer signed a document saying that they had turned it all over, and then someone saw more, said it was mixed in, or they believed or had probable cause to think, which again tends to be an informant saying, I saw it, or I heard about it from a credible person who saw it. Could have been Secret Service. It could have been people who have a legal obligation to protect the Constitution of the United States of America, who saw that national security documents or classified documents clearly marked as such, who was not aware via the normal process that they're no longer classified, did their job and reported it. Why are we negotiating for government property that, as far as the process goes, is still classified? And if we find out later it was not, had the process been followed, we wouldn't have had a reason to go raid the place to get them. But they talk about it as if there needed to be a negotiation for the government to get what the government, by virtue of a lack of the process being followed, thought was actually classified. Are we really not to do anything just because of who it is? And let me extend that to someone else. Hunter Biden. We'll get back to that.
Exactly. And that's what we don't see, and that's probably what's in the redacted section. I mean, this is the point. What is the purpose? What is the goal of the DOJ? If they know in January from the 15 boxes, 14 of them contain all of these classified materials in various stages of classification, then why not initiate the raid right then? Where does the negotiation stop? Why is there not another subpoena?
Oh, boy. Negotiations to get government property back, government property that they think is classified and top secret by virtue of what they received before. Sounds to me like they were extending quite a few courtesies to Donald Trump and his lawyers to get the information back. If 18 months of negotiating is not extending the opportunity for Donald Trump to get the government property back to the government, whether he declassified it or not, I don't know what is. I'm guessing most people who have search warrants don't have 18 months of negotiating before the search warrants are executed. I'm guessing most people can't have classified documents, top secret documents, in an unsecure place and be asked to give them back for 18 months. And then he actually said, why aren't there more subpoenas? Which is a reminder, because people said, why didn't they just subpoena him? They did. They did. Fox News thinks they need more subpoenas. Why? What standard are you talking about that if someone needs to get more negotiations than 18 months, more subpoenas than just one, to get back something that does not belong to him? Why? Why are you telling people you know are going to believe you that message? Why? Real question. And I mean real question. Why are you misleading people that way?
That's what we don't see in these documents. There is this part where it says there is probable cause to believe that additional documents that contain classified NDI, National Defense Intelligence, or that are presidential records subject to record retention requirements currently remain at the premises. But it goes on to say there is also probable cause to believe that evidence of obstruction will be found at the premises. Obstruction. So did they find evidence of obstruction, that the president was purposely trying to obstruct either their efforts or some other effort? We don't see that in these documents.
Okay, let me help you. And I'm no journalist. I don't have as much experience as you. I don't have as much time in front of a camera. I don't have a list of things that make you more credible when you give out a message to a large number of people. I don't have a large number of people watching or listening, live or coming back to watch it later. Really, I've extended the show to friends and family up to this point. If you weren't a part of my Facebook, you don't even know this show exists. Now, I say that for the people who eventually will come and watch and will look back at some of the shows and wonder what were some of the topics and why were they talking about this or what was their take on this? And you know, those things happen. People will come back and watch previous episodes once they know the show actually exists. I'll say it again, friends and family know about this show. Those are the people I'm testing this on. But you, sir, talk to millions of people every day. Why would you speculate on some of these things when you know the answer to your questions could very well be in the document, but have been redacted? I'll share it. I'll share it. This is the document. I'll go up to the top for you. I'm about to get dizzy. There's the beginning of the document. There's explanations. There are places where you hear about probable cause. There is information that we have gleaned from the actual document. You can tell they've tried to keep out the names of the people who wrote it. And then you start to see things being redacted. They're doing it for a reason. They told you. They made clear what the reason was. To protect witnesses. They're being threatened. Trump is not saying don't threaten these people. He's not saying leave them alone. He he openly talks about his distrust of the entire process. He has supporters who talk about defunding the FBI. They encourage all of these things. And then when there are actual threats and people actually being threatened, I don't hear them saying stop. It feels like January 6th. I don't hear them saying stop. If there were a riot on behalf of Black Lives Matter, I would expect Joe Biden to get on the air that day and say, stop. Stop that nonsense. Stop. I feel like it's his obligation. But again, here's the document. 38 pages. And then you get to the pages that, quite frankly, would probably answer their questions. So the speculating they're doing, they know that the answer to much of their speculation is probably right here in the document itself. They want you to believe that because it's not being shown to you now, something must be amiss. Something must be wrong. Maybe they didn't do it right. Maybe it doesn't exist. They want to paint a picture from that we can't paint. Don't paint a picture from that. I don't know what it says. I know it was enough to convince a judge that a judge should give them a search warrant to go find out after 18 months of negotiation, after subpoenas. But they want to speculate about what this is. There's the document. There's the affidavit. You can see the number of redactions. It goes on and on. They're not jeopardizing the investigation just to quench your thirst. It's not going to happen. I'll say it again. They're not jeopardizing the investigation just to quench your thirst. Back to the Fox representation of the affidavit being released.
And there are page 24 to 27 are essentially all black. And I assume that there is some of that in there. They say they're protecting witnesses of the grand jury and methods for intelligence services. But there is on the outskirts of this concern about where the documents are held in the basement of Mar-a-Lago, in the Pine Room, and that there were foreign nationals at Mar-a-Lago that had access to that area or near that area, and that suggests that's on the outskirts of the blacked out portion.
Yeah.
I have to stop there. Factual, credible reporting. He wasn't talking about his opinion. He was telling you actually what happened. I have to give them credit when they do it. And I think part of the reason people believe some of the rhetoric part or some of the opinion part is because they do a pretty good job of intertwining the two, such that you would believe part of it is news, part of it's opinion, and you can't see the line between the two. Don't get me wrong. I'm guilty of the same thing. I don't want to tell you what you should believe. I want to bridge the gap. I want to bridge the divide. And I think that's impossible when you're being told things that we know aren't necessarily true. Don't mind doing it on the left either. I don't. Some of the explanation and rationale about why the student loan forgiveness is beneficial doesn't add up. It's not beneficial to 2/5 of the people who are getting it being the wealthiest people in our country, and only 12% being the poorest. Doesn't add up if you're looking for altruistic ways to advance people and their causes. Listen, I got it when you were talking about fraudulent for-profit universities that the federal government shut down. And when they were shut down, there was no money available from those agencies or those organizations and colleges to give people tuition back. So the federal government said, we know fraud has been committed. We're going to shut these places down, and we're not going to make you pay for something that was completely fraud. I get that starting point. I get that. I understand that as a starting point. I don't understand where it ended up. It's the same when the representation of the right goes too far. In this case, now they're giving you factual information, which obviously confuses the average person. So for the average Fox listener who, like most of us, we don't have a staff of reporters out there looking into information, checking things out, coming back to us with detailed information that no one else has. We get our information from the same places, people. But when you go to a place and you believe what they say, we're all at risk. I'm at risk. So I look at as many sources as possible, but we're all at risk of believing things that just quite frankly aren't true. Back to the reporting.
Page 26 of the 38 pages, section 70, there's probable cause to believe that documents containing classified NDI and presidential records remain at the premises. That's when full redactions begin. After that leaves a lot of room.
Yeah, I got the instruction from you.
For speculation there. Brett, to your point, though, about could there have been and was there room here for another subpoena to happen?
Are you kidding me? How many do you need? 18 months of negotiation. Why is that your question? You have enough information to believe there was probable cause that would threaten our sources and methods of protecting our country. Why aren't you digging into that? Why are you asking about more subpoenas? That is an injustice. You're talking to an audience that you know wants to hear what they want to hear, so you're feeding it to them, even though you know it's misleading. Why do you need more subpoenas? Is that the only question you have from the information available to you? You are part of the divide. You just got people to believe that more should have been done, more than subpoenas that already existed and 18 months of negotiation for documents that don't belong to the man. You're part of the divide. You're part of the reason that Lindsey Graham said what he said. I'll get to it in a little while.
Before the raid of a former president's home, and to that, that's the question you've had since the release of this redacted affidavit.
All right, Sandra,
I find it.
I
find it to be disgusting. It's disgusting to me. I'm sorry. It's disgusting. Now, Karl Rove is no friend of the Trump administration. He obviously was an architect of a lot of the things that happened in the Bush administration. I felt like he was a little bit more honest, but I'm sure it had something to do with the fact that they don't align. Is that really what it takes? You can be in the same party, although there are different factions in the party and different wants and wishes and methods of getting those things. But does it really take you not liking a person or the direction they're going to be honest? Can't people be honest even if they like someone? I'm being honest. I don't love Joe Biden. I don't feel like he's getting the job done. I don't believe he's building the confidence of Americans to the point of more people being behind him. I prefer a president to have higher approval ratings. I prefer a president that is able to reach across the aisle and touch more people and get those people with a feeling that, okay, America's headed in the right direction. I prefer that. But in this case, it's a Republican, different factions of the Republicans, more mainstream, the old school, the establishment Republicans. Sometimes people call him that. Karl Rove comes out, and I think he at least speaks with a little bit more honesty.
Classified material still within the walls of Mar-a-Lago, and had a responsibility to report that up through the chain of command, or maybe directly to the counterintelligence division. they would have somebody who, had said, in essence, you have been misled, whether it was a deliberate lie or a lie based in ignorance. Somebody told you there's no more classified material here. There is classified material here.
Carl, Jonathan Turley was just joining us a moment ago, and he said, yes, the affidavit does confirm a couple points, that it did appear in the leaks that we have seen come from the press throughout this process. But he also says the affidavit did not establish that the Trump people were wholly uncooperative or non-communicative, while noting that they were asked to turn over material and did not do so.
I'm going to stop her. You already know there was a subpoena. You already know there was 18 months worth of negotiation. One of your reporters already communicated that. So you're trying to paint a picture that because you can't see all of the information, that it means it didn't do this, this, and this. How do you not know that the information you are claiming or speculating doesn't exist isn't right there in black and white, but been redacted for the safety of the people who gather the information, for the safety of the people who protect our country? It's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's frustrating and misleading. It's part of the divide. It's frustrating.
There seems to be still a huge piece missing there in the timeline, and the affidavit doesn't appear to clear that up. Going back to the New York Post headline in the middle of all of this, you could have just asked.
You have enough evidence to know that they did, to not portray it that way. Let me say it again. You have enough evidence to know that they did ask. They were even told all of the information was given. They even sent a subpoena. You already know that. This is where the American people get led in a different direction. And I don't care if it's CNN, MSNBC, Fox, the network channels, on television. I don't care where it comes from. Sometimes we're just outright misleading. And then you wonder how we end up in the circumstances and situations we do.
Well, first of all, I agree with Jonathan Turley about the leaks. They are very troubling. This is what we don't want to see out of a process like this. But look, it is clear that beginning sometime in early 2021 through January of 2022, the NARA, the National Archives and Records Administration, was continually asking for the return of all material. The Presidential Record Act is clear. A president does not have the right to leave the White House and pick and choose what documents he wants to take with him. He can ask for copies, but those are the property of the American people. And since 1978, no president has left with the, sort of picking and choosing their own documents. So they were asking. How many times, we don't know, but the impression in the affidavit is that they asked for it multiple times, and in January were given material back. They again begin to ask, the federal government begins to ask the former president for return of anything else he has there, and they know there's material there. I mean, they go on June 3rd and view the boxes of material. They have a general sense of how many boxes are there. So, maybe we ought to ask the government, how many times did you ask for the return of the material? And President Trump has said several times, all they had to do was ask. Well, my sense is they were asking for a year and a half. And why he was holding on to these materials when he had no legal authority to do so under the Presidential Records Act is beyond me.
Uh-oh. Go against the narrative. Karl Rove, you might not be back for a little while, buddy. I appreciate a network's ability to make money. I appreciate their ability to say whatever message they want to say. But when we talk about the divide in America, people are being misled. People are being led astray on purpose. And if Fox revenue is the purpose, hey, free market, that's what you get to do. If CNN's revenue is the reason that it's being done, hey, who am I to tell them how to make money, not to make money? Don't go down the path you want to go down. But hopefully you're creating a new show, maybe even a new party, but you're creating a new show called the Divided States of America. Because I see situations like that where your only question is really, why didn't they ask more? How come they didn't send another subpoena? That's really your only question. That's your question? All your years of journalism, all your years of looking into things, what you get from the affidavit is, how come you didn't do more? Ask more. 18 months and existing subpoenas weren't enough. Why not ask more? Karl Rove comes on and says, I'm pretty sure they were asking. And I'm pretty sure that the president knows he doesn't have a right to keep whatever he wants. There's a process. The Presidential Records Act specifies what can and can't happen. He's going against it. He has documents that belong to the country. He can claim that they're declassified, but if you don't go through the process and tell the people who need to know it, those people are going to come after those documents because they don't know that you've declassified them. This is silliness. This is silliness. Here's where it gets serious. What the affidavit doesn't say is talking about classification. Doesn't matter to the Espionage Act if a document is classified or declassified. Makes no difference. The act focuses on aiding foreign adversaries. The act focuses on harming the United States of America. So the documents that Trump may have declassified in order to cover for the fact that he didn't give his documents back to the federal government when they asked for them after 18 months of negotiations and a subpoena, despite the fact that Fox is trying to say we need to ask more, they still could be harmful to the United States. As a matter of fact, they're probably documents that should never be declassified. And if people were honest with themselves and actually cared about national security and the people who get it and the methods we use to get it, if those things were a bigger priority than Donald Trump, people would be honest with themselves and say, hey, buddy, you shouldn't be declassifying all this information just to cover yourself, just to look out for you. How many people do you put at risk? How much of the country do you put at risk? How much of our national secrets are you willing to jeopardize to cover for yourself? If people were honest with themselves, they'd be asking. But the Espionage Act, again, it's more about aiding foreign adversaries. It's more about harming the United States. It also extends to national defense information, which in some cases is not authorized even for a president to have. Can I say that again? National defense information, sometimes the president isn't supposed to have that information. So we're literally willing to give up our state secrets. We're willing to give up the most sensitive information. We're willing to give up the people, and we're willing to give up the methods, all so that he can keep documents he's not supposed to keep. Trump supporters, I'm not asking you to stop supporting him. I'm just asking you, why are you making these exceptions? Where are your standards for this? Because you're probably going to say Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden's not the president. Hunter Biden's not in a position to keep national security information, put it out there to protect himself. If he was, I would say the same thing. Get him. If Hunter Biden's laptop has evidence of anything, use it and get him. If Christopher Wray, the Trump-appointed FBI director, isn't moving on things that he should move on, the right needs to do a better job getting focus and evidence out there to more people, more investigators, more news outlets, more, I don't care who, to make it happen. I don't want an exception or excuses for Hunter Biden. I don't. I do not want Hunter Biden to get any exception. His father being president is meaningless to me. I hope they get him. And as people point out Hunter Biden, what I also hope is that they remember that they pointed him out so that they too could say, guess what? Guess what? Go get him. Go get Hunter Biden. You think I got a problem with that? I don't. Go get him. Go get Hunter Biden. You just have to ask sometimes, where are we? Where are we with honesty? Where are we with the things that we think are the most important for the rest of our country? And sometimes our answer is just pathetic. But again, back to the Espionage Act and the fact that classification or not makes no difference. It really makes no difference. The affidavit makes clear that the law prohibits the unlawful gathering, transmission, or loss of defense information, and it does not use the term classified information, undercutting the argument that he declassified it. Trump could be in trouble because he has information that he may not need to have, supposed to have, and he certainly didn't go through the process, and he didn't inform the people who investigate. And my question is, and I'll just keep asking him, why do people who support him support every and everything he does? Now, again, why is Marlon, why are you spending time on this? The average person doesn't care. Summer's almost over. They got to go back to work. Their kids got to go back to school. Life has to get back to its normal routines. We can't hang out at the beach. We can't do all the normal things we want to do. At the end of this clip, you'll understand why politicians, their leadership, lack thereof, accountability, the lack thereof for that too, ultimately has the potential to do serious damage to all of us. Take a listen.
It says it routinely warns people about potential misinformation. I wonder why they didn't warn themselves or the FISA court in 2016.
Well, you had a really good high-minded discussion with your last guest. I'm just going to get really to the bottom of all this. Most Republicans, including me, believes when it comes to Trump, there is no law. It's all about getting him. There's
potential misinformation.
I'm sorry.
I wonder why they didn't really warns people about potential
technical issue here. I wonder why they don't think we would use the law to get him, and why everybody would try to shield him from follow the same laws everybody else has to follow. That's my question.
In 2016.
Well, you had a really good high-minded discussion with your last guest. I'm just going to get really to the bottom of all this. Most Republicans, including me, believes when it comes to Trump, there is no law. It's all about getting him. There's a double standard when it comes to Trump. What happened with Hunter Biden is that the FBI weighed in to make sure a story didn't break for the 2020 election. We now have whistleblowers at the FBI telling Senator Grassley that they were told to slow down and back off Hunter Biden. And I'll
Why are they only telling Grassley? Tell every media outlet in the country, tell every radio station, tell every podcaster, scream it from the rooftops. Why is Senator Grassley the holder of all information? Make sure you get it to everybody. Because if in fact that's what happened, everybody in that chain needs to be held accountable. Everyone in the chain of protecting Hunter Biden needs to be held accountable if that's what's happening, including Joe Biden if he's a part of it.
say this. If there's a prosecution of Donald Trump for mishandling classified information after the Clinton debacle, which you presided over and did a hell of a good job, there'll be riots in the streets. Donald Trump for mishandling classified information after the Clinton debacle, which you presided over and did a hell of a good job, there'll be riots in the streets.
So if you're wondering why I'm talking about the affidavit, if you're wondering why I'm showing you pictures of redacted documents, if you wonder why I'm talking about 18 months of negotiation and subpoenas and how Fox News represents it, Lindsey Graham thinks if we actually held President Trump accountable, there would be riots in the streets. Now I'm going to lay out some things I've said about riots. The stuff that was happening in Seattle and Portland. I mean, come on. To what end? What was the goal? Why was the illegal taking over of streets and businesses, and to what end? To what end, Lindsey Graham, would there be rioting in the streets for holding a person accountable for breaking the law? To what end? Now, here's the sad part. I made this comment, I think, on a post once. I'm against riots completely, totally. Don't want to see them happen. The sad part is in some cities, they're actually effective. Let me make sure I clear that up because I don't want you thinking I'm recommending them. I don't. I hope everybody involved in breaking the law gets caught, held accountable. Every single one of them. I hope there's enough video out there, cell phones, businesses, street cameras. I don't care how they get them. Hope they get them all. Having said that, in cities where they're rioting over police abuse, they tend not to want that to happen again, and they tend to look into it in de-escalation tactics and training, and they try to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And that's sad that that's where it has to go for some people to actually respond to the things people in America actually complain about on a regular basis, and for some people for their entire existence in the country. But Lindsey Graham says they'll be rioting in the street if Trump is arrested. If the law was followed, the law that he says they don't use because they use a double standard, if they actually use the law, courtrooms, subpoenas, warrants, evidence, indictments, the normal process, because, and he gave this guy credit for the way he handled Hillary Clinton, but she wasn't indicted. He said he did a great job. I'm not sure what Lindsey Graham thinks is a great job if he thinks something criminal was happening. I would say the opposite. If he thought something criminal was happening and this guy didn't get anything done, he failed. Having said that, if they do the normal legal process and they get to the point where they need to arrest and prosecute Donald Trump, to what end does a riot, Mr. Graham, who I'm sure had a problem with Black Lives Matter and the riots that came from it, and you blame Black Lives Matter for those riots rather than ignorant, irresponsible people who were rioting on the coattails of peaceful protests? I'm sure you talked about the Democratic cities like Seattle, like Portland, where they had these riots and these takeovers and the nonsense. It's like the nonsense in the Bundy Ranch and all these. It's just nonsense. It doesn't matter which party it comes from. There are better ways to accomplish goals. They thought that was the best way. I'm here to say, my opinion, it wasn't. So to what end, Lindsey Graham, will there be rioting for following the law for Donald Trump, and assuming, I guess, that they wouldn't be if they actually arrested him? Do you have evidence that they didn't do things right, if that's the conclusion that they came to, where you have already predicted that there would be rioting in the streets? Would you step up and say something to get it to stop? Or would you think because they tried to apply the law to somebody you like, it's not appropriate, and the law can only be applied to people you don't like? Just curious. That's why I'm talking about this. Riots in the streets for holding a man accountable. boy, the fear should be that there are some people who, and Lindsey Graham was one of the, he had some very clear, terse words for Donald Trump early on in the campaign. It's amazing how power will get you to change your mind rather than just being honest with yourself. Sounded to me like a mixture of campaign rhetoric and honesty when we, in the previous version of Lindsey Graham, got what he really felt about Trump. And then once he comes into power, something changed. I would prefer honesty in each party about what their party is doing. I don't really have one, so I can be honest about both. I can say things like the Joe Biden loan forgiveness, I don't get it. 2/5 of the wealthiest people getting it, 1/5, 12% of the poorest people. I'm not sure I understand it. Not sure I understand the goal and the impact and how we could have used the same dollars to accomplish more, whether it be through student loans or funding people to go to college or getting colleges to cap within reason the prices if the government is going to be a primary funder of it. I mean, it's a simple equation. If the government is the primary customer by virtue of giving the loans or guaranteeing the loans, they ought to use its muscle to make sure what we're buying has the value it's supposed to have. So when I think about the left and the right joining together, many of us want our kids to go to college. Many of our kids would like even trade school to be provided for. But the combination of the two, having those discussions to make it better, really should have been the goal. And I think the outcome would be more reflective of that if they had. They didn't. So it sounds like a campaign promise kept, buying votes, typical politics, not what I'm looking for or interested in from our politicians. It's not in the best interest of all Americans. No, I certainly had a good time with the hypocrites who were complaining about it. Oh, you take out a loan, you pay for it. But my mortgage interest deduction that I can take off of my taxes and not pay taxes on that amount of income that I made, that doesn't count. The 4% of PPP loans that had been forgiven within a year, no, it doesn't count, even if it was much more than $10,000 or $20,000. That's not what I was talking about. $1 trillion to the wealthiest people in tech. No, that's one thing. It's okay for people to figure out ways to not give up their money to the government. But it's not okay for people to find a way or get a way to not give their money back to the government. America, let's just be honest. Let's be better. But it'll start with honesty. There are times when you hate things to the core and then you support when it benefits you. And I may be guilty of that too. Let me know. I can always be reached at the host at thedsashow.com. You are always free to comment. YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. That's where the show appears, both live, noon weekdays, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Obviously, you can catch replays. We get more people who watch the replay than are available during my time frame when we do it live. But having said that, your feedback is always appreciated. We do this show because there's a divide and we want to talk about it. We want to get people to be more honest and open. We want there to be a push and a culture where we have higher expectations of our politicians and our leadership to work together, not to work to create, to feed the divide. That's the purpose of the show. I'm grateful for you tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more. Thanks again. You're listening to the Divided States of America show.
Thanks for watching the Divided States of America show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the channel and share this video with your family and friends.